My earliest childhood memory is Christina sitting on top of my chest, pulling my hair and shouting, "Give it to me!" I cried and held my dolly tight. "Stop it!" I said. "You're hurting Priscilla!" Christina grabbed my ears and pulled until I heard ringing cracks like glass breaking into my head. My grip loosened from my dolly's polka-dotted dress. Christina pulled away and ran out of the room giggling. "It's mine now, mine, and you'll never see it again." I ran to Mommy. "Christina took Priscilla," I said. "Calm down, dear. No one likes a tattletale. You can share your toys." But Christina takes all my toys." "Oh, don't be so dramatic. Here, clean yourself up and get ready for lunch." "She takes everything. I hate her." Mommy grabbed my shoulders. "Don't ever talk that way about your sister. Do you understand me? That's a terrible thing to say. She loves you very much." At lunch, Mommy made me apologize for what I said. Christina grinned at me from across the table as I did. I think that's the moment she knew she would always get away with it. I found Priscilla buried in the muddy rose bushes a week later. Her hair had been cut off, and her arms and legs have been melted to shriveled black. I sank my face in her rumpled dress and cried. "I'm sorry, Priscilla. I'm sorry that I couldn't hold on to you." When I turned back into the house, Christina was smiling from the window of her room. Christina took more things as we got older. She found where I hid my toys and broke them with her friends. She stole my favorite clothes and told Mom that they were hers. Once, I invited a friend for a sleepover and Christina glared at her all night. She cornered her in the next day in school and told her that she could sit at the cool girls' table if she stopped hanging out with me. And always, that smile. That bright, toothy smile. Everyone always told her how beautiful it was, but that's just only because they weren't looking closely enough. If only they could see what I saw. If only I could just show them. Just once. When I was 16, I fell in love. His name was Derek, and he sat next to me in biology. He was tall and painfully good-looking with an easy sense of humor. I was too intimidated to talk to him at first, but he had a kindness in his eyes that could always make you feel totally at ease when he spoke to you. No one could make me laugh like he did, and I left class every day beaming like a sunrise. I stopped by his locker one day as school was letting out, asked about the bio homework, but didn't hear his answer. I wanted to ask him to the winter dance. My heart was throbbing, and I couldn't catch my breath. He was just so amazing, and I was so boring, but I knew I could make him happy if I had the chance. He made a joke about our bio teacher and squeezed my elbow as he laughed. I opened my mouth to ask him when I saw Christina walking our way down the hall. I said goodbye and hurried away. Hopefully she hadn't seen. I looked up as we passed each other. I tried to hide it, but I knew she saw the quiver of fear in my eyes. I knew because I saw that smile. She was at his locker the next day, giggling and twirling her hair and touching his arms. A few nights later, I heard the step, step, step of her sneaking him upstairs to her room. Mom was a sound sleeper, but Christina's room was next to mine, and I heard everything. Every night after that, step, 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 and then the muffled sounds I tried not to hear. One night, I waited at the bottom of the stairs for Derek to sneak out. He gasped when he saw me standing in the dark, but I told him not to be afraid. I untied my robe and dropped it to the floor. I looked down at the ground and told him that I could make him happy too. I stepped towards him, touched the back of his neck with a shivering hand, and leaned in. He pulled his head back and gently pushed my shoulders away. As he was leaving, he looked back at me with pity in his eyes. "Don't worry, I won't tell her," he said. When Mom died, she left the house to Christina. Everyone said it made sense now that she and Derek were married. I didn't need that big house all to myself, did I? No, they said, it's better if I in a cozy little place just for me. Just for me. Christina posted pictures online. Hundreds of them. I would scroll through them late at night and imagine myself in her place. Imagine that I was the one smiling in her old backyard. I was driving the new luxury car, that I was vacationing in Europe, that I was kissing Derek on the forehead every morning. Everyone was excited when they announced that they were having a baby. Her belly grew in the pictures that she posted. Pictures of crib shopping and prenatal yoga. She soaked up the comments and attention, talked about how grateful she was, how blessed she had been. At the shower, I sat in the corner of the room while all her friends chattered and laughed. She beamed that toothy smile to all of them, but now and then she glanced at me, and I can see the truth. "Isn't it amazing?" one of her friends said to me. "This house, this life, that gorgeous doctor husband. God, everything just comes so easily to her, doesn't it? It must be inspiring to have a sister like her." Inspiring? Yes, very, very inspiring, excuse me. I left the party and drove downtown. I sat in a parking garage and squeezed the steering wheel with white fingers until my hands were stiff and numb. At nightfall, I left the car and walked the neon streets to a dingy bar that I knew. Glass after glass, until I felt nothing. A scruffy boy with a beer belly and a football jersey staggered up to me. He reeked of cigarettes and old popcorn. I finished my drink. He would do. I stared at the wall when it was over. He finished inside me. "Don't worry, hon, I'm on the pill," I lied. He took my number, but I knew he wouldn't call. Didn't matter. A few weeks later, I went to the doctor and confirmed what I already knew in my heart. Soon I wouldn't be alone anymore. Soon I would have something that Christina couldn't take from me. That night, I dreamed of a little girl with blue eyes and a pretty polka-dotted dress. "Priscilla," I whispered when I woke up. I'll name you Priscilla." Christina wouldn't get a chance this time. I would carry my child unseen and deliver her in secret. Afterwards, I would use all of my savings to move across the country. "We have no other family, Priscilla," I would have to say. "You have no aunties or uncles, but it's okay because I'll love you extra to make up for it." I dreamed of her again. She looked up at me with sparkling blue eyes, clear and innocent. I held her close, tickled her, kissed her head. She giggled and cooed, and my heart was so full it could burst. I loved her so much already. But when I looked up, I felt a flint strike of fear in my stomach. Christina was looking at her, smiling. I woke up shaking. "Please, no," I whispered into the dark. "Please keep away from my baby." Every night, the same dream. Every night, Christina was closer. I slept less and less, until my brain was a clump of rotting meat. I could barely control my fingers to type at work. One morning, my boss called me into his office and asked me to take a leave of absence. I begged him to let me stay, that I needed the money, promised that I wouldn't make any more mistakes, but he just looked at me with pity. The same look that Derek gave me. The same look the doctor and Christina's friends gave me. I made my way home in a slow-motion fog. Keep breathing, I told myself. You'll figure something out. You have to. For her sake. I sat on the couch, shivering and feeling a heavy lump in my chest that seemed to be sinking down into my belly. I think I just needed to rest for a moment. Rest, collect my thoughts. I closed my eyes. I held Priscilla, but her eyes weren't bright and playful anymore. They were shimmering with fear, and her skin was a deathly pale. I looked up. Christina stood over us. She smiled, and rows of needle teeth glinted in the dark. I reached out, grabbed Priscilla's arm, and pulled. I screamed and held on, begging, "Please stop. Please leave us alone." Christina knocked me down and sat on my chest, and I felt the weight of her bony body press into my gut. Priscilla's face retched in agony. "Please, please stop. You're hurting her," I cried. Christina pressed forward into me, and I felt a stabbing pain deep in my middle. Priscilla's body twisted, her limbs bent away like melted plastic, her skin flaked off to show oozing red underneath. With a final jerk, Christina pulled her away from me. I screamed myself awake. The room was dark and silent. Sweat soaked through my clothes, and my breath was quick and shallow. I rubbed my eyes. Calm down, it was just a dream. See, it was just a dream. You're all worked up over nothing. Everything is fine. Everything is... Wait. Something was wrong. I reached down between my legs and felt a thick, slimy goo between my fingers. I pulled my skirt up. In the moonlight, I can see a little circle of black, a small, dark puddle soaking into the couch cushion. My whole body went cold and empty. Everything was suddenly very tiny and far away. I could see something, but it didn't feel like I was looking at it. It felt like I was looking at a fuzzy picture from a great distance. My ears were ringing a high melodic whine, tiny and distorted by the heaviness in my skull. After a moment, I recognized my phone ringing, looked over at it, unable to make out the words on the screen. I picked it up from the table and swiped it open, smearing red across the screen. Hello? Oh my god, sis, I'm just so excited to tell you. So, you know how Derek and I have been going back and forth for months about whether or not to know the sex of the baby? Well, I decided I couldn't take the suspense, and I asked the doctor to tell us during the ultrasound today. And guess what? We're having a baby girl. A girl? Yes, isn't it exciting? I mean, I was pretty sure it was a girl anyway, but now that we know for sure, we can finally decide on a name. I thought long and hard about it, and Derek isn't too crazy about this one, but I want to name her Priscilla. You know, after that old doll we used to play with when we were little. You remember? Priscilla. You're going to name her Priscilla. Isn't it a pretty name? I think it's perfect. Derek will just have to name the next one. Anyway, I'm so excited, and I just wanted to share this with you first. And I also wanted to say that I love you, sis. I want you to know that I love you, and I'm sorry. I know I wasn't always nice to you when we were growing up, but sometimes I think back to those days and I feel such a terrible guilt. I wasn't the big sister that you needed me to be, but I want to change things. You're such a wonderful person, and I want you to be part of my daughter's life. Oh gosh, just listen to me crying like a sap. Fucking hormones. I'm sorry to do this over the phone. It's just just so wonderful, isn't it? Life is just so wonderful. Life is wonderful. Yeah, it is. Well, listen, Derek's got a late shift at the hospital, so I'm gonna try to get some decent sleep tonight without having to listen to his snoring. Call you soon, hon. Love you. I stared at the phone in my hand. I stared and stared. Everything. She took everything from me. I hate her. But no, you can't hate your sister. How dare you? She loves you. Didn't you hear her say it? How can you say such a terrible thing about someone who loves you? Never say you hate her. Hate her. Hate. Hate. Driving across town with the moonlight flashing between the leaves. I couldn't read the street signs, but I knew the way home. Home. Our home. My home. I was vaguely aware of another car honking and swerving out of my way. Nice car. Expensive car, just like your sister's. Just like yours. I walked up the driveway, the old house dark and towering. I picked up a garden spade lying by the rose bushes. You buried her in those bushes, didn't you? You buried her there the first time you took her from me. Yes. I remember. I remember everything. I walked up the stairs, step, 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 silent and slow, just like you, Christina. I've learned so much from you. I reached the top of the stairs and opened the door at the end of the hall. Look at you, sleeping so peacefully. No snoring to keep you up, not tonight. I pulled some old clothes from the hamper and tied them to the bedpost above her head. Gently, carefully, I tied them to her wrists. She moaned and squinted in the dark. Is that Derek? Hello, Christina. Her eyes snapped open. What? Why are you? She tried to pull her hands free, but they were secured tight. Relax, honey. I was so moved by your call tonight that I just had to come tell you something. What's going on? Why am I tied up? Something very important. I want you to know that you shouldn't feel guilty about how we were when we were younger. You were perfect. I see that now. I hated you for so long, but now I realize that you are exactly the big sister I needed you to be. What the fuck? Untie me, you psycho. Do you hear me? Now. I now know why you kept taking things from me. It was to make me stronger. You pulled things away again and again so I can get better at holding on to them. I understand now. You did it because you loved me. I held up the garden spade. Christina looked at it. Her eyes were huge and white in the dark of the room. What are you doing? Finally, I understand. You were always testing me, training me, making me better. And tonight was the final test. Tonight, I get to show you how strong I've become. She trembled beneath me. I don't know what's going on, but please, put that down, okay? Just put that down, untie me, and let's talk about it. I sat on her hips and looked at her powder blue face in the moonlight. My fingers squeezed the handle of the spade. Listen to me very carefully, Christina. All my life you have taken things. My love, my home, my child. You've taken everything from me. I touched the tip of the spade into her swollen belly. But this time, I'm going to take something back. I pressed the spade into her and dug a chunk of flesh out of her abdomen. She wailed and thrashed and cursed with desperate power as I peeled layer after layer away from her in wet ribbons. I dug and scratched until my arms were weak and burning, her screams like rusty nails hammering into my ears. Finally, I reached inside the glistening sack and tore a hole in it. I ripped it open with my fingers and reached in to feel the squirming life inside. Christina wailed like a siren as I pulled the baby out of her with a sucking pop. I held my girl, my treasure, my little angel in my shaking hands, and I looked at her. She gleamed purple and blue, twitching and wriggling with the breath of new life. I touched my face to her and cried. She was more beautiful than I could have ever imagined. "Hello, Priscilla," I said, kissing her slippery forehead. I stood up and looked down at Christina. She was choking and sputtering a black liquid, her jelly's insides spilling out into the bed. I smiled at her. Beaming smile. Her smile. A smile I finally understood after all these years. Yes. Thank you, sister. I see now that you were right all along. Life is wonderful. I carried baby Priscilla across the hall into my old room, humming a lullaby. She was so perfectly quiet and still, already so well behaved. A peaceful calm washed over me, and I curled up with her on the floor. I laid next to her in the dark of the room, closed my eyes, and I slept.